So in here in person, as Colette and myself, we've got Keith, Greg, and Shayla and Kim online. So we're not gonna have a quorum today. Which doesn't disrupt a whole lot, as we'll have to just put the minutes in the financial update as an action item at the next meeting. But if we could, I know extenuating circumstances make us end up needing to go online, but if we could attend in person just for quorum's sake, that's going to be helpful for these types of committees moving forward.
Ned, how short are you on quorum?
3.
Okay.
So,
Just so that you know, I mean, I'm just going by my calendar invite. It had it as a Zoom meeting in my calendar invite, just so that you guys know. Otherwise, I would have been there.
I think we include the Zoom meeting all the time just because people will could potentially attend online.
Yeah, it's.
But we haven't established any of these meetings as online for the calendar year.
Yeah, we have to declare it a virtual meeting.
So per the state's guidelines, we'd have to specify which ones are online or not. We did not do that.
I can make it more clear in the calendar invites.
Yeah, and Ruth, put me on regular distribution if you can. I didn't know until Margaret couldn't make it that I was going to be needed there. Otherwise, I could have planned that.
All right.
Thanks.
But we do have 2 new members. One is online. Shayla, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Oh, welcome to the executive committee.
Thank you for having me.
Any words of wisdom for us as you're coming on with us?
None yet. I'm still learning a lot. I just stepped into this role as the new ED for BRAC on November 1st. So this is my first meeting with you all. Just looking forward to learning more and figuring out where I can fit in to help.
Well, we appreciate you joining, and we look forward to meeting you in person at a future meeting.
Thank you. I plan to be there in person next time.
And Emily is on the. All right, we can go to comments from the public. There's no one here to give public comment. I don't see anybody online.
There's someone in the waiting room.
Rose. Is there anybody online that wishes to give public comment? Nope. All right, we will move on past public comment. We can go ahead and address, are there any changes to the minutes of January 24, 2024? We can get the edits in now, and like I said, we'll have to wait to take action on those later. And then the monthly financial update, any notes or comments we need to make there?
No.
So we'll approve those at the next meeting as well. We do not have any presentations today. So we'll go right to number 5, new business. And 5A is structure for the next quarterly meeting. So the last time we met, we had the results of our survey. We had some recommendations from the consultant about our structure. Those of us here all had some discussion about kicking off what that could look like down the road. But we have to start making some decisions as to if we want to change the structure based on the consultant's advice, or if we want to continue, because we'll need to talk about that with the full partnership in March. And then Then part of this conversation is actually talking about the meeting in March itself with the full partnership. Typically, we get around the table and have a meeting similar to what the executive committee meeting is. And I'm going to throw out some thoughts on perhaps changing that up a little bit based on some of the conversation we had at the last meeting around breaking out some topics or roundtables or whatever we end up calling it, around some different groups. So I know, like Kim was discussing the rural issue, housing in the rural areas, homelessness was talked about. So Ruth Logan, Keith, we've had some conversation about how this could maybe work moving forward. That could, engage our regular partnership members in a different way to make this happen, and then also might inform a breakout session or something like that of the full partnership meeting. Did I capture all of that pretty well? Yeah, Logan, Ruth, Logan, chime in as needed, or Keith. So I'll just throw out there kind of what I was thinking. I don't think it's a good idea for us to set up a bunch of committees or specific formalized parts of this body. I think that works. I just think from a procedural standpoint, it puts a lot of weight on those who could or could not be involved, like quorums and minutes and things like that. When the idea really around it would be topic discussion, but also maybe finding individuals in these different spaces that could become participants for the partnership. So I'll use one of the ideas as or one of the topics as a group. If we broke out some roundtable discussions, similar to how we do lunch and learns, but more informal than that, where you're not inviting speakers, rather you invite people that are working on that issue day in and day out. So for example, Kim, if we did set up a rural housing group, and then somebody from the partnership or a couple of people that work in that group from the partnership took it on as captains, if you would, to organize some meetings where they could be online, they could be Zoom, to discuss the topic. What are the big issues in our that we're dealing with? What are some of the top topics or top things that perhaps the regional housing partnership could take on? And it may take a couple of meetings to get that, and then you come back to the executive committee and say, these are some initiatives that we think the partnership could work on in a regional way to support housing in the rural area. So in the, like I would imagine in the, in university, private sector, et cetera, there's ways to hold meetings where, as opposed to it just being free for all discussion, you can talk about, well, here are the big issues that we're dealing with. Say there are 10 or 12 of them. Which ones do we think are the highest priorities in our region? The body could discuss it, figure out who the key players are, figure out the top 3 priorities, come back to the executive committee and go, executive committee, in what way, and here's how we think the partnership could be helpful in trying to get at this issue. The 6 areas that we kind of threw out there were homelessness, rural housing, urban housing, the for-profit world, the nonprofit world, and then a residential body. And then those don't have to be those aren't set by any means. If somebody had a different idea for what the topic could be, trying to build them around the 4 pillars and how we're set up. Greg, you always speak to wanting to keep that, that structure, that underlying foundation as part of this. So that was thought of in brainstorming here. And then, just set them up as roundtables. I like, the roundtable piece is a lot of time in many different meetings where the meat of these, where the substance really comes out. And why not just organize that and see what comes of it? And then maybe by the June full partnership meeting, we do check-ins. And the top priorities could be identified to come back to the executive committee for some initiative work. I think that attacks the survey work. I think that attacks and could identify people that are not in the partnership that could be members, speaking to membership, and could also perhaps identify some folks as we start to think about freshening up or cycling new people onto the executive committee. So I think it serves different purposes or different objectives for us. But that's what I've got, and that's built out of the survey results, et cetera. Talk this through with Ruth and Logan. I've talked it through with Keith, and then as the vice chair, and then the plan was to bring it to you all today to see what you thought, get your feedback, build on it, strengthen it. So I'll just stop now and ask if Ruth or Logan, do you have anything to add?
That sums it up very well.
Keith, do you have anything to add based on what you and I discussed?
No, but other than I want to apologize. Apparently I have 2 meetings today on this. One is in person and one is virtual. I looked at the wrong one, so my apologies. That's on me, not you guys on this. I just read the wrong calendar invite. So no, nothing to add. It's spot on what we chatted about the other day.
So I would first ask, and then I'll kind of dive into how the quarterly meeting could work in March based on this idea. But I'll just ask Colette and Greg and Kim and folks like that, what your feedback is. And, you know, this is the first time you're kind of hearing it, building on the conversation from last month, but see what your feedback is. Kim, I saw you raising your hand.
Yeah, are you looking for additional topics that are of concern to us? Is that what you were doing with reading through?
Those 6, I was kind of breaking out the category areas. So, you know, like you had mentioned, it would be nice to have the rural folks to be able to meet and talk and discuss rural things. I think you all would get, you know, just the discussion alone, I think would be helpful to you guys.
Yeah, and I don't know if this would be separate or if this falls underneath one of your other categories, but for us in the rural areas, seniors is a huge concern, but we have a larger population, about 21% in the rural counties of people who are 65 and older. So that, I mean, that may fall underneath one of your other topics or just under rural in general.
I think like just my immediate reaction to that is if you had, I don't know, 10 people discussing rural issues and that was perhaps one of the 3 things that you thought were the most urgent, then you would have a meeting that would discuss of these urgent items, how could the Regional Housing Partnership help in that particular area? And then that's what I would envision could come back to us to say, what can we do as an initiative, as a body to help attack that particular issue, whether it's communication or getting them in units, or I don't really know what the action items would be. But similar in the way that the partnership did the incentives workshop for Albemarle County. I mean, that was an initiative. Keith is going to be talking about one here on the agenda a little bit later about an initiative that's possible for us. So it very well could be that the urban group comes up with seniors and all the other groups come up with that as well. Or there's some crossover in the roundtable groups. And then I would think that that would speak to us quickly that, oh, there's something we could attack, but we just have different angles of coming at it.
Okay, sounds good.
And then to be clear, so like Kim, it might be you or Margaret or folks that would say, all right, if I had to come up with a list of people that are critical in the rural area, not specific to the partnership, but are out there in the space, who would they be? And then try to convene them in a way that said, you did 60 minutes once a month over the next 3 months. And just have roundtables, discussion groups, and see what comes of it. And then that's what we would report back on in June, type of deal.
So this is a way to involve people outside the partnership.
Correct.
Right?
Maybe do some recruitment, maybe find who do we not have around the table. It doesn't commit them to like
Yeah.
specific regular meetings for a year or so, but you know, I'm of the mind that if I participated in a think group, a think tank, a discussion group, and it was engaging for me for 3 months and I was gung ho about it, you know, that's going to clearly indicate that that's somebody that's active and cares in the space. That's probably the type of person that would be trying to maybe come into the partnership as a new member. And perhaps even, you know, depending on the space, work in and through the executive committee.
Ned, what is your 6th topic, residential? What is that?
It was the one pillar that I didn't have, like when I was thinking about this, all of the stuff, and what's interesting, and maybe Keith and Greg can talk a little bit more about it. But the residents are the one that we don't have a lot of representation from.
Right.
So we do everything, like, we're doing stuff for residents, but we're not really having residents come and participate. So I was trying, that's where that was at, like, if we had a group of residents that we could get engaged. That said, look, as people out here living, trying to find, you know, affordable housing, here's what we think. I think that's the toughest area though. If we wouldn't put a body together of just us talking about residential issue, we're already doing that, you know, it's like, can we make, and that's why I don't know if that would be a functional group or it was just part of the list that I was brainstorming.
You know, that residential component is always the most difficult. as most know, I also chair the Piedmont Community Land Trust, which has a 3 parts to it, and the residential part of it is always impossible or very difficult to go do that. The basic concept here is, somebody from the executive committee is going to be on these quote unquote roundtables, for lack of a better term. And the ultimate goal is for that person to report back into the executive committee so we can spider and reach out to more folks like Colette mentioned in it. So it's a way to reach out. It's a way to do it informally, so we don't have to advertise or Smith forgets he's doing in person or not in person kind of thing on a whatever day it is, Wednesday on this. So it's pretty good. I'm feeling really great about it. I think it's kind of living. It's going to change a little bit as we move on. It might grow, it might reduce, but I think this is a good solution to it.
And to be clear, I don't want this to be an executive committee member workload. I want this to be a partnership member workload. So the thought is in the March meeting, maybe we break out by the topics that maybe there's only 5, there's no magic number to 6. And say, it'll be a space thing, especially if we're here, we'll have to work through the logistics of it. But in the quarterly meeting, we say, all right, we're gonna break out by these topics. And I'll have a formalized idea of how that meeting and maybe the first discussion meeting can go. But then the members would be tasked with, it's your job to go find the people to form this discussion group or this roundtable group. And that's their walking orders on March. And then, the discussions could take place in April, May, and even perhaps June. And then we see where we're at by the June quarterly meeting. But this then would be like, say, I don't know, just like, I don't know, sunshine and is the captain. I'd like to see 2 or 3 people involved, so it's not on one person's shoulders. And then they go find the folks. I don't know who the folks are, but we seem to have people working in affordable housing that don't know we exist sometimes or what we're doing. And I'm hoping that that's coming out of the survey, and I think this could perhaps help with it. So that's the idea or thought, but today we was getting the executive committee's feedback and endorsement of the idea. If you like it, you think it could work, then Ruth, Logan, Keith, and I will get this ready for prime time to present to the full partnership for the quarterly meeting, and then go from there. Greg, you have any thoughts, or Shayla, or hello, Rose? I don't know Rose. Hello, Rose.
Hi there, I'm standing in for Margaret Claire from the Nelson County Community Development today.
Tell her we volunteered her for some work.
Will do.
Good. So any other thoughts here? Any good idea, bad idea? Want to go ahead and we'll roll it out at March and see how it goes?
I think it sounds good. I would motion to approve.
We're gonna move and do that today. Full consensus. We can't move yet. Just no quorum. All right. And then we have initiative researching occupancy. The next item, if there's no other items there. Greg drop off. Greg had to drop off. I didn't catch that. See him on there. Hope he's all right. Sorry. It's like we lost Greg there. I hope he's all right. So new business item 5B, initiative researching occupancy of local affordable units. So I'm bringing this to the committee to see. I don't think this is a heavy lift, but I want to see if it's worth spending a little bit of staff time on. It seems there's a sentiment in the community that in the rental world that we're not doing a good job. We collectively as everyone, not we, the partnership, are not doing a good job of getting people that need affordable rental units into the affordable rental units. And based on, I guess it's anecdotal, but based on the experts in the room at the December incentives meeting and some other meetings, it seems like we are doing a good job getting people into affordable rental units. It's affordable home units where the problem area is. And what I'm talking about is a unit goes on for a certain amount of time. If it's not filled, then it flips to a market rate unit. This has come up in the Albemarle Planning Commission. I've heard it mentioned in other meetings. So the thought was perhaps the partnership as an initiative could take the lead on one, getting some information from each locality that says, how are you doing getting people into units, rental versus homes? Two, and then two, if it is true that we're doing a good job in rental, what can we do to get the word out there that that's happening? I keep looking at Stacy.
Policy recommendations at the table.
But then
I have a feeling he'd be looking at you, he'd be sitting out at that wall.
two, getting, if we are getting people into the units, how do we get that information out, or what's the best way to do it? But I think part of that's just communicating what we do as a partnership, what other places do to make that happen. And maybe we become the central location of saying, here's what Nelson County does to help you get into rental units, and just be a catch-all for the info. And then the home ownership, maybe it helps us wrap our heads around what the problems are, what the reality is. And that could perhaps be something down the road that we attack as well. I think we all know that's an issue. My biggest concern is I don't want, like in the developer incentives piece, everybody wanted to try, or well, not everybody. There were folks that wanted to switch the conversation from the incentives to, well, let's not do incentives, let's get the people in the units. Well, if we're already getting the people in the units, why are we trying to divert the conversation? So that's one I'm just bringing to you all to see if you think that would be okay, to spend a little staff time. I'd ask Stacy if that was something in Albemarle that we could get our hands on. It seems like it is. At the TJPDC meeting, I asked Councilor Payne. He felt like it was information that they had in the city. So it would probably be, just reaching out to the different counties to get a sense of how they're doing. And then doing a little work on, well, if you're Greene County or you're Louisa County and you're trying to get folks in these units, what are you actually doing? And then listing that somewhere on our website and then promoting that stuff. But that would take some staff time to do. Any issue, or would folks be okay with directing staff to help work on that particular issue? Throwing that out there for thought.
I'm just afraid that we are over budget for the year.
And we're over budget, so it's a great time to be asking for new initiatives from staff.
But I am working on the job description for our vista for next year.
Well, I can tell you this, elected officials love asking for things, whether we're on budget or not, so.
I would say no.
So I'll take the lead on this. Any thoughts on that? Any feedback? I don't think it'll be a huge time constraint, but I think it's more just gonna be communicating out that, yeah, this is working and here's the proof for them. So I'm hoping that's the case. Home ownership's a bigger task than communicating. Keith, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, so as far as just a concept, as far as the home ownership portion of it, and since we are tapped out of money, and this just got created, but Charlottesville Association Realtors has just formally kicked off their foundation. Dave Norris is now the executive director, which is good news, I think. That may be something we can reach out to them and see, since they have access to the ownership data, just like I do. I don't know if we can do it on the rental. They can't do it on the rental side. I know that. But on the ownership side, they have the data. So I think there's a path there. And, if they truly wish to participate in helping solving the problem, you can go online and read their mission statement and their strategic plan, which Spark Mill, which helped us, did for them. That may be a good reach out that I don't know if they got the staff to do it, but maybe they can kick in a few bucks for it. Just a thought off the top of my head.
That's great. I did see that Dave was named out a few days ago, right? Just this week.
Yep. That's a great hire. Dave's gonna rock and roll for us.
All right, no objection then? get after that. Item 5C initiative, this is a fiscal impact analysis as a tool. Keith, this one was kind of your idea, so I'll let you do the talking on that one.
Thank you. Those have probably heard me get on the soapbox. I'm going to get on it again. Those of us in the room, I think, are familiar with what Albemarle County has done for the DOD portion of it. They created a return on investment on what the DOD's economic impact, positive or negative, is for Albemarle County. I think, Kim, I'm going to mention you by name here. Some of the rural counties in particular actually either don't understand or they believe all housing is a negative drain on the jurisdiction. And there's really no stats that prove that. And what I was proposing that this body looks at, particularly after I just found out we don't have any money, but what I asked us to look at was, what does it make sense for us to do a fiscal analysis impact or do some sort of ROI similar to what Albemarle County has done on housing? Either look at it as a regional picture, then a regional to each jurisdiction, so that there's actual data that verifies that. So, and if Stacy's still in the room, I think the only county in our jurisdictions that require this at a rezoning is Greene County. So Greene County requires in a rezoning a fiscal impact analysis. I'm not 100% sure if Albemarle does it on it. And back in 2011, Virginia Realtors actually did a white paper on it. So I just think, as a body, this would be a really great topic or a really great subject to tackle, so that we have a document that's updated or reviewed that says, okay, new construction or housing in Fluvanna County impacts negatively. And if it does, this is what it does. Or if it impacts it positively, this is what it does. I could tell you the one in Greene County and if I can share my screen, I'd be more than happy to do that. There's a 500 unit project, which I got my fingers on, that actually showed a positive impact to the county from a fiscal perspective over time. So I think, there's a lot of conversation about negative impact, but nobody ever can seem to prove it, at least from my perspective. Whereas if we get an independent body such as Weldon Cooper or a firm of some sort to go ahead and help us with this, I think it'd be a really helpful tool for the elected officials. So that's my concept. I've been kind of preaching this for a while, and I would love to.
So Keith, remember at the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference, the lunch where the governor spoke? I think everybody was wondering, well, how is he going to tie in housing here? What's he going to say? And his takeaway was housing is economic development. So that's what I brought back to Louisa and Fluvanna. A little more receptive in Louisa than Fluvanna, as I'm sure you're shocked. But there are, certainly economic upsides that we can quantify. And Fluvanna's, seeking to remain more of a rural area, but there is a suburban component to it. And I think there is an appeal there for them to be a housing center, and showing them that this is economic development would be beneficial. And certainly Louisa's climate, I think, is more in tune with that and would be more receptive to hearing that kind of data. So I'd be very interested to see what we could pull together on that, Keith.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind if I shared my screen?
Yeah, please.
So this is in 2011. This is, as I refer to it, during the very end, at the time we didn't know it, but the very end of a time of great unpleasantness for those of us who have been in the industry for a while. So they did a really great job of talking about the multipliers, the indirect, the direct impact and the induce. And what gave me this idea, listening to the DOD report, they use these terms a lot, you know, what's direct, what's indirect, and what's induced. So this was a report that was done in 2011. It's a white paper, and I'm going through it pretty quickly. But you know, something like this that spells out the basics of housing and the impact on the local government, I think would be a helpful tool. But anybody who wants this, I'll be more than happy to send a link, or you can go ahead and Google it. It goes through specific case studies. One other document real quick here. Hold on a second. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do this simultaneously. Hold on a second here. And again, I would be more than happy to share this, and I will go through it quickly. But this is for a recent project in Standardsville in Greene County, and you're required to do, and it talks about the project units, costs, so forth and so on. This is the third party that the county requires the developer to do. It's a different format, but in essence, it's the same kind of report about what the impacts are for this particular project on the county of Greene. So I'm going to stop sharing, so I'm not wasting everybody's time here. But from my perspective, I think this body is built to go ahead and do this and do it for each jurisdiction. And I'll shut up.
It's a question I've started to ask the last couple of months, specific to some conversations in housing world. Any other thoughts or comments? I mean, I think that's a good idea. UVA, do you guys do any internal stuff for your developments? What do you guys do? Whether it's housing or other,
You mean economic development?
like a fiscal impact analysis, or
Not really.
like that Northport project would be,
Yeah,
I'm sure, well, they may have done one for that, just relative to the connection to the rest of the,
yeah.
but that might be an outlier. I don't know if it's normal. I didn't know if we required one in Albemarle. I figured if we did, it would be part of our packet, so it's never been part of our packet, so.
Right.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like we have to do, any other thoughts or comments on, is this something worth us taking up and seeing? It sounds like we got a couple things we need to find some money for, or at least scope out what the time and commitment is and maybe attack it from that standpoint. And that's something I think Keith, I, and Ruth will have to put our heads to and see what we can work out. Maybe talking with Christine or even some jurisdictions and see what we can come up with.
So, Mr. Chairman, my thinking was, does everybody think this is a good idea to pursue, develop a scope, figure out what it looks like, figure out how we're going to pay for it,
Yeah,
and then move on? But if everybody thinks this is not something this body should tackle and we should stay away from it, then that decision is simple and we move on to a different direction. That's kind of my request in this conversation.
right. Agree. I mean, I agree. This is what this partnership is kind of designed to help with and can do. Can have good impact. Anybody object to the idea?
I'm not sure I have a good concept of what we're talking about. So I get a particular development project could have a fiscal impact analysis done for it. You know, how many jobs it would create, tax revenue, blah, blah, blah. How do you do it just overall for a jurisdiction? Keith?
So read, and I'll send you the link, but reading this 2011 white paper done by Virginia Housing would help that discussion a lot. It takes a look at it in a more macro perspective. But some jurisdictions just think any housing is bad, right? So your point to specific projects, and we're not asking for this to oversee any jurisdictional requirements such as Greene or whatever jurisdictions might do that, but this is just more of a bigger picture, holistic, And again, I can send everybody the link. The Virginia Housing did a great write-up on it. And maybe I'm getting a bit political here, but the reality of it is some politicians won't vote for anything that has a house in it, right? And that, in my opinion, could have a negative fiscal impact. I'll just say this out loud. My house at Lake Monticello, I pay the exact same cash in my in my real estate property tax as if my house was in Glenmore. So I pay in Fluvanna County the exact amount of cash, doesn't matter about tax rate, all that junk. What I pay per year for my home in Lake Monticello, if I was to pick it up and put it in Glenmore, I would spend exactly the same amount of money. What don't get? I don't get the same services, right? I'm not 10 minutes from my office, right? Yada, yada, yada. Oh, by the way, I also have to pay HOA dues, which is more than Glenmore, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. So, my opinion, elected officials, not all, but some, don't really understand the impact, the positive impact. And I may be wrong. This report might say, you know what, Smith, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Housing is a negative impact. Nobody really knows. Hope I did a better job that time, Colette.
But I would imagine, I have yet to read the housing report, even Keith had shared with me before. But like that defense industry impact analysis that we did recently, like at that level, if you've got, I would imagine they're looking at, well, if you have the growth rate coming in, once those people enter your economy, the tax revenue for the rezoning, et cetera, probably take a snapshot in time and say, this year, this is how it impacted the area. That's probably the way they would get at it as well. But I'm not expert on it at all. I think of it from the standpoint of, the developer, that's a business, right? They're employing people. They're constructing things. So there is a way to tease out what that means for a local community beyond just the revenues generated once the people are living in the units. And that's an element I'm very much interested in.
Well, that's what your DOD did, right? Your DOD report did your indirect, your direct, and your induced, right? And it breaks out this is just not property tax, right? This is everything else that's included in it. Hiring Greg to be the architect, right? So we having money in that, or hiring an engineers or contractors. So all of that is part of this direct portion of it. Then you have your indirect, which is, your materials and so forth and so on. But, it's an interesting pyramid. I just think when folks take a look at, elected officials take a look at this, they just look at a very narrow spectrum of housing. Now, I'm a pro-housing person, so obviously I'm going to be in favor of housing. But I think having math to it will be helpful at the decision makers level or not. But that is the reason I've been pushing this a little bit.
Greg, I saw you unmuted. Did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think, my whole career I've been hearing that, residential is a negative impact on a community, fiscally negative impact on a community. And it might be quite valuable to show that that's simply not the case, which is I'm sorry, I lost. Did anybody else get dropped off for about 10 minutes?
We were worried about
So I
you.
missed the beginning of Keith and the end of the discussion about the groups, which is odd because I lost nothing else during that.
Greg, when I speak, most people get disconnected automatically, so it's
No.
not an uncommon thing.
So that's why I've been somewhat quiet. But there sounds like that could be of value. I don't know what such an analysis would cost. It's hard to believe that such things haven't been done and done more recently than 2011. And I say that because it wants to be specific to our region, but a little research might identify a consultant that's done this sort of thing, which might save some money in reinventing the wheel.
So the Virginia housing one is was a statewide snapshot on, you know, what housing does to local jurisdictions. And maybe there's a grant there or some sort that to help with that. But I spoke with them last week in preparation for this chat, and they haven't looked at Virginia housing has not re-looked at this since 2011.
I would think that they would reap significant benefit from such a document, such a study, and hence that's a good source for the funding.
Right, well, then maybe.
And maybe for the right consultant.
Sounds like we have at least enough support here to figure out what the scope is and how we can maybe make this happen. Greg, since you did drop off relative to the next item on the agenda, I kind of already lumped into the 5A. The advisory engagement groups are basically the roundtables that we discussed. So we've already hit that topic. Did you have any thoughts or feedback on that, Greg? Just since, like I said, you dropped off and we're listening to the bulk of it.
Well, I heard what you had to say about it, and I thought it was a great idea. I was going to ask that this sort of came out of a discussion about how the actual board structure might restructure itself, and I'm wondering if there's any thought about the relationship of the roundtables to a possible restructuring and what we're going to do, if anything, with the recommendations for the restructuring.
Yeah, I think part of the conversation you missed when you dropped off was that we're hoping that the discussion groups, because it's not limited to partnership members, could do kind of two things in the survey results, finding folks that are not part of the partnership that we want to be a part of the partnership, whether that's executive committee or the larger body. So I think it could help kind of as a recruitment or find the people that we need or want in the room. And then two, usually once you get folks in the room, you might identify those who wish to have a little bit bigger role or more prominent role in the organization. We've not really touched on or addressed if we want to change the structure of the group. We haven't discussed that today. You know, going from the executive committee, we've got an executive committee, we've got a partnership. The partnership tasks us with basically doing the governing work of the whole body. The consultant was suggesting we go to this advisory group and then still have an executive committee. But then the advisory group is more directing the executive committee. And then it was even floated, I believe, at our last meeting, maybe there's a third level there, but we didn't really flush that out. I'm of the mind in terms of structure to kind of stay where we're at for the moment, but see who we're missing. And then once you have a realistic idea, like if we were going to try to bring on 20 new members, then I think we have to have a very, very big conversation about how these layers work. If it only identifies 2 or 3 or 4, well, then I think what we currently have can absorb that. And then it's just a matter of who and how people are represented on the executive committee and what that rotation looks like. But that's just me kind of, as I've thought about it since last time we talked.
So is it the intent at the next full partnership meeting to structure some roundtables thereafter, or to try to have them in advance, or for the partnership meeting to do so?
Yeah, my thought for the next quarterly meeting was that introduce the roundtable kind of idea, actually break out based on the topics at the quarterly meeting, tasking the partnership members as the ones who lead the effort to make that happen. And if they could set up monthly roundtables to happen by the June quarterly meeting and identify priorities like we just identified and talked about 2 initiatives here, that they report back to the executive committee at the June timeframe and then see how it goes. I think by then the report back could also include who did you have that weren't partnership members, how many, you know, we can set this up where they can survey the people that are involved. Do you want to be a member? Do you want, what level of involvement would you like to be in? I think we could talk that through. We haven't got to that point, just not knowing how today's conversation was gonna go. But we can certainly do that by the quarterly meeting. But, you know, set up the meeting where it's not just us sitting around the table and going through an agenda, actually break out. into the discussion groups wouldn't even necessarily be discussing the topics. It would be like, let's say the rural area one, like Kim, maybe that day in the breakout delivers the concept to the group a little bit more in depth. And then the conversation is, who do we need to include? And then identifying what 2 or 3 people will be the leaders to make these happen, to set up the discussion timeframes. Because I think they could be, you know, I would imagine each group has a better time, like the for-profits, the nonprofits, if we go with those topic areas. I don't really, it doesn't matter to me when they meet. I think if they meet by Zoom for 60 minutes or 90 minutes once a month, that they'll find the optimal time within their group to do it. After they invite some members and get members to say yes, and then just make it happen. I don't know, my hope or the optimist in me goes, this could be successful, because like I mentioned to Colette, it's not like signing people up for an obligation. It's really participatory, getting at your expertise. And then my experience in that in the past is usually it identifies players that want to get more involved or more engaged with the work.
For us, I think it would help to engage our local jurisdictions more. You know, they, as you guys have noticed, Louisa and Fluvanna have not been heavily engaged in CVRHP. Some of it's just, you know, a matter of convenience, right? If the meetings are in Charlottesville, it's very difficult for us to access. But if we can have smaller group meetings with them, I think that creates a lot more awareness, a lot more buy-in from the rural areas for, you know, for that specific topic.
Yeah, and Kim, I mentioned in, when we had our brainstorming session, like in Albemarle, I mentioned it the last time we talked, we've got an urban element and a rural element.
Right.
So
Yeah, you do, sure do.
Stacy's got to wear both hats depending on what we're discussing. But
Right.
there could be different folks involved with, you know, from Albemarle, you could have a certain segment of Albemarle going to the rural conversation. You could have a different segment going to not that there's that many people to spread around. There could be. I think I could have a conversation with the leadership of Impact around a residential conversation. They do a good job of getting residents to engage and get feedback from and discuss the issues that they bring up. And there's 1,500 people spread out around. Now that's specific to Charlottesville, Albemarle. But since they're based on all the faith groups that are out there, I would imagine they have relationships that span out to the other localities. So their big meeting's coming up this March, so I'll be interacting with them. I can put that on the radar to say, hey, what do you think about this? Could you be helpful in that? They attend our quarterly meetings. They were at the incentive conversation. They typically have representation at our annual meeting when we do it, or biannual meeting. So that could help us get a residential group put together. They could maybe, I think they'd be interested in helping with it. Cool.
So I think it's a great idea. Let's do it.
So that actually takes care of 6A, because the advisory engagement groups was specific to that. I kind of lumped that into the structure for next quarterly meeting as they were kind of attached to one another. Have I forgotten anything, Rick? I think so. Well, great. Then we'll get to work on those 2 initiatives and see what that would mean staff time-wise. Well, then that's going to bring us to the roundtable. Colette, want to start us off with the roundtable today?
Well, I guess the big thing is the approval of the rezoning for North Fork that the foundation received. So given that, I think that we're now ready for the next steps in terms of soliciting a developer and trying to see how much affordable housing we can get.
Yeah, that was I think we had a good, respectful conversation about it at the approval that night. So I was grateful for that. But it's a good development. When you take the housing or the affordable housing elements out of it, what it's attempting to do economically for both the bigger site and that area of the county, it's a good development.
Yeah.
Great. Keith, you got any element? I'm just going by the squares I see on the screen now. Keith, you got any items for the roundtable?
A couple real quick. First, congratulations to UVA. I know this was a uphill fight, and I think this is going to be a good thing for us all in the region. And then I've already chatted about the Carr Foundation. I think that's another step in the right direction. We've got some more people in the fight, or entities in the fight, which is a good thing. I do want to I'm going to put my Piedmont Community Land Trust hat on for a moment and just talk a little bit about a project or a home we just did in a rural county in Lake Monticello in particular. And to kind of put a little bit of numbers to this for sale component. So we bought a home for $250. We needed to put $10,000 into it, which is what we did, and then turned around and put it on the market for $215. So to put a concept to that 215 number, that's the maximum sales price at today's mortgage rate that an 80% AMI buyer can afford. They can't go any north of 215, and that's us paying for the closing costs, which is roughly $15,000 for the buyer. So there's roughly a $60,000 delta, which we raised subsidies for, between what we're buying it for $260 and what we're selling it for $215. Keep in mind that $15,000 bait, that $215 is a cost, right? So it's actually, we're not receiving $215, we're receiving $200 back at the closing table when we sell it. And I just, as you guys were talking, I just did a quick look at all of our jurisdictions, single family attached, single family detached. There are 9 homes for sale that are under $250,000. So we can't even reproduce this. And by the way, looking at all the 9 houses, most of them need a lot of work, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 worth of work to bring it up to some level of what the market should be at. So this is a win for us. I wish we had more, but we are reaching out into the rural jurisdictions and making a somewhat of a difference, not a huge difference. But I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of context on the sales side, on the ownership side, what this really needs to look like and how heavy of a lift that this is going to be. Unless somebody has any questions, that's all I've got to report in.
Thank you, sir. Kim?
Nothing too new. We're plowing forward with our building projects in both Fluvanna and Louisa County. All of the normal regulations when dealing with federal funding are an impediment. So wetlands impact, we had to do a phase 1 archaeological survey in Fluvanna, accessing water and sewer, which is available in Louisa, but requires it to pass under CSX Railroad, is a huge impediment. It's all individual well and septic systems for the Fluvanna sites. So those are just sort of typical hurdles for construction of affordable housing in rural areas, or just building in general, right, Keith, in a rural area. And we've gone through budget requests for both Fluvanna and Louisa County, requesting significant increases with the burden that housing has suffered the past few years. And I do think there is a growing understanding in both of those counties for the needs to support organizations like ours. And I think if we can show them actionable impacts that CBRHP can bring to these counties, I think we'll get a lot more buy-in from them. And I'm really glad to see that, I think this will be an opportunity, bringing rural housing full subgroups to them and letting their voices be heard in that area, will kind of pull them into working together as a group on these issues. So I appreciate you guys supporting that effort.
Great, thank you. Greg, what do you got going on in your world?
Well, I thought I was going to excitedly tell you about a 36-unit development that the land bank was going to get involved with Piedmont Housing, but it didn't pencil out. So I'm looking for another site to help try to seed a development. This one happened to be in Charlottesville, and it happened to tie into the new zoning, which we hope would be a great pilot project to show how the rezoning was a good thing. And unfortunately, it didn't pencil out for reasons not the fault of any of the above organizations. But if anybody has any thoughts on sites, I regularly study sites to help try to get projects underway.
What are we looking for exactly, Greg?
Multifamily sites. This was 36. It was 18 2/2 towns. Was a nice scale, but the site was too complex.
I'll
Could
keep
be
an
in
eye
the
out.
county.
I'll keep an eye out for you.
Great. Since we may not be restructuring, I'm going to take the opportunity now to say that I have expressed in the past that I feel that the executive committee needs a little churn at the end of this year. And I'm feeling that I should be one of the ones stepping off. So I'm letting everybody know that that's my intent at the end of the fiscal year. So I think after the quarterly meeting, we should discuss the makeup of the executive board looking forward, with the assumption that my position as the private sector should change, and I have thoughts. I brought someone in on the overall partnership last year with this in mind, so I have thoughts on who might be really good to replace me on the board, but I feel it is time after, what is it, 4 years to get some churn, and so that's my intent. So when it comes time to discuss that, we can start candidly discussing getting rid of Greg, because I've already made that choice. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think it's frankly a conversation we can have at the next quarterly meeting with the larger partnership, built around these discussion groups to kind of give everybody else some same thought on it. I think a lot of us, I appreciate the fact that you have been the consistent voice saying this to us in the meetings, because I think we're all of the same mind on that. So I think we kind of put it out there. Then that gives us some months where if people are interested, it could help identify that. I think it could fall into place nicely with the timeline. Even in some of the other categories, you know, I appreciate that you're finding somebody to follow in your footsteps, but it could get some other folks in that same mindset. So perhaps when we get there in March, at the quarterly meeting, we can call on you to kind of speak to it a little bit more at that meeting as well.
Okay, just give me a heads up. Thanks.
All right, Shayla, so the roundtable is just a basic sharing of what's going on in your space with the group, kind of let us know what's happening in your world. Do you have some items to share?
Thank you. Yes. So BRAC completed its annual point in time count last month. That's the coldest night of the year that's designated by HUD. And I'll have some preliminary results posted on the BRAC website, hopefully by next week, but I'll certainly send that out to all of you. But that's the night that we go out into the community. We assess the number of folks who are in shelters all across our region and see who's sleeping outside unsheltered as well. So we have numbers that we send out to HUD every year. We also do a housing inventory count as well, just to say how many shelter beds are available, how many are being used, and this affects our funding year to year. So that data should be posted pretty soon. Other than that, we're just rolling along. And I look forward to more of these meetings. This has been really interesting for me, so thank you.
Thank you. So in Albemarle, the North Fork project was approved. So we're looking forward to seeing what you'd be able to do with that specific to affordable housing. So we had a good conversation that evening about that topic in particular. We also, this past meeting, we approved our developer incentives in Albemarle. And I think the thing to note, so what we landed on was a 15% tax incentive for the total piece, not an incremental increase. So for the total piece, and it's not, this part I want to make sure I'm advertising, so help spread the word. It is not fixed or restrictive. It's a flexible conversation. So if a conversation came in and the incentive, maybe it needs to be 17%, maybe it needs to be 12 with parking requirements. There's flexibility built into the language and the intent of this to help the county not just get to the 20% at 60% AMI, but to get beyond and further. So let's say a development could come in and meet the 20% at 80, needs maybe 10% to get to 60%, and needs something else to help take it even further to 50%. That the county is basically saying, let's have the conversation before your rezoning to figure out what a tailored incentive looks like for your project, because we know it's going to change from project to project to see what it takes. The idea that conversation is not a heavy time lift. It has to be kept separate from the rezoning, but you would know as a developer going into your rezoning application of whether or not the incentive was going to be there for you upon rezoning. And what the incentive would be, trying to get a predictability for each project. The intent behind the 15% was designed to close the gap that would exist between the rental income that exists at 15% units at 80% AMI, and then how that rental income would change at 20% at 60% AMI. And the math of the 15% total tax incentive was designed to help close that gap. It does not close it completely at 15%, but it might for some projects, depending on the project. The other part of this is when you move the units down from 80% to 60% and up to 20% total units, your total value, your assessed value drops. So the collected tax also drops. So the combo of the two could help make it pencil out. But the idea is that, yeah, let's sit down at the table and look at the specific project and see what it takes to get you there and perhaps even further. And then the board would be, the board is going to take on what the board process needs to be to quickly get the incentive, say, oh, yeah, we would agree to that incentive, but then still have to go through the rezoning process because other things have to be looked at. But the performance agreement would be a simple document. The incentives would be known. You would know as a developer that the incentive is there for you. If you're successful in getting your rezoning, then you just move forward. We talked about compliance. We talked about some other elements of it. But it's now go time for that incentives and for the change in the benchmarks that we're trying to achieve to get the units. So staff has indicated, both Stacy and some folks from our finance department, that to sit down and have some discussions with developers just to understand the program more. So if you have folks or you're hearing folks going, I don't really know if this will work, there were some people that were concerned if it would work or not, come in and talk to us. Come in and say, let's talk about my pro forma or my conversation and see how this would work. Encourage the for-profits, the not-for-profit. I think this is specifically, I think, more geared towards for-profits and rental developments specifically. So just come in and have a conversation with us so they understand what it is. So that as projects come up, it's not, then we don't have to step back and learn. Everybody kind of knows where we're at. Happy to have that done and behind us, and the board supported it unanimously. We approved Montclair out in Crozet. I'm bringing this up for two reasons. One, it's 122 units, but there are going to be some habitat units in there. So there will be some affordable home units coming online for that project. This project was not received well in the community, but the board passed it 4-2. Supervisor Pruitt is listening in today. He is Supervisor McKeel's our alternate for the board. So I know he'll be listening in. But earlier we were talking about how housing is good for a community. And I appreciated that Supervisor Pruitt during the Montclair approval told people, you know what, having new neighbors is a good thing. You know, there's economic reasons, there are different reasons, and yeah, there are impacts coming in. But the fact that you have people coming in to be with you in a place that's designed for the development is a good thing. I live next to Belvedere, which is building out, and I remember everybody not liking that, but it seems like everybody walks through each other's neighborhoods and they talk to one another and they enjoy being around them for the most part. The only ones that are shunned are the ones that are driving too damn fast through there. So, and they're just shunned when they're actually doing the act, not when they're walking, because they walk much slower. But I just thought I'd point that out, that housing, Vito Chetto was a developer, he had made some comments about it as well. That there is something to be said that when you're a community that's experiencing growth in your destination community, folks want to come here and live here, that beyond the economic impacts, having those people is in and of itself a good thing. So echoing Supervisor Pruitt's comments on that. Montclair, North Fork, and then this happened, I think I don't know if it happened in both jurisdictions by our last meeting, but it was Virginia Housing came to us about the gap in funding for Premier Circle. It ended up being $750,000 in both the county and the city, and both jurisdictions did approve that money to fill that gap to get Premier Circle moving out there on 29. That's going to go to help permanent supportive housing out for that project. So I just thought I'd mention that. Anything I missed, Stacey? One? Well, I appreciate, we're kind of going to end a little early here. I guess we went longer than I thought about.
Mr. Chairman, real
Yes,
quick, please. So
Yes.
I put in the chat the white paper that I was referring to 2011. So if anybody wants to download it, it's in that chat. So
Can we capture that? Just email that out to the executive?
Yeah, I can email it out.
So we'll have that emailed out to everybody on the executive committee as well.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other business or items that we missed? Well,
May I just say with Stacy in the room as well as you, Ned, that Albemarle County, I think, really deserves kudos for being such a great leader in the affordable field in our region. I think that it's great to see you cross the finish line here with the incentives. It'll be interesting to see how they play out. And I think your invitation to come in and talk is the right next step. So kudos to the county.
Well, thank you for that. There are so many more things we gotta get after. I let Supervisor Pruitt talk, and we're gonna be past time today on all the things that I think he agrees that need to happen. But thank you for that, I very much appreciate that. Any other items? All right. Oh, I will mention that the budgets are going on, so pay attention to your localities. I always take the moment to say that. You know what your elected stand for when you watch them work on their budgets. So all the jurisdictions in the TJPDC are in budget time, so keep your eyes and ears open, watching and listening to what they're doing. But with that, our next meeting will be the quarterly meeting. And I look forward to having everybody together, and we'll put out as much info as we can ahead of time, alerting the partnership to what we're going to do that day. But if you're talking to anybody, by all means, give them a heads up and try to get their heads kind of start spinning on it. We'll go from there. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.